Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight. As we anticipate Trump's inauguration and hope that he will be able to drain the swamp, I think most of us are confident that he will secure the border and deport many of the dangerous illegal aliens that are here. But it is not a job that he can do on his own. He needs the support of the states to be successful overall. While some sanctuary states like California and Colorado vow to oppose him, how helpful will the red states really be? What are they willing to do? Has Tennessee done all it could have done over the last several years to make it less attractive to illegal aliens? What can or will our state do to help President Trump on this issue of illegal immigration? To talk about that, about what states can do and more, and to help us with this situation is our very special guest, Shari Rendall. Shari is the State and Local Engagement Director for the Federation of Americans for Immigration Reform, known as FAIR. You can visit their website at fairus.org. She brings over 15 years of experience in government relations and grassroots advocacy to FAIR. In her former position, she led the legislation department, coordinating lobbying efforts on Capitol Hill and briefing congressional and administrative staff on various issues. She's also been responsible for grassroots communications and helping the associations devise legislative strategies. Shari began her time in D.C. working on Capitol Hill as a legislative aide. Thank you for joining us tonight. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I am well.
Well, it's good to see you, and I've been looking forward to this. You know, our session starts tomorrow. Next week, of course, is the inauguration, and I know there are a couple of bills having to do with immigration, and we'll talk about those, but there's a whole lot to talk about. And one of the first things that I want to get into is, and I know that we know over the last several years a huge number have come across the border, but I know that talking to you prior to the show, you've got some numbers. So let's start off with the numbers that have come across the border in the last few years.
Well, they are pretty bad, as you can guess. Just this fiscal year, we had 2.9 million encounters on our borders, and this is the second highest year in history, with last fiscal year being the highest at 3.2 million encounters. And from 2021 through 2024, there were more than 10.9 million encounters nationwide. Border Patrol has encountered individuals from more than 160 countries. And even more disturbing, there were 394 individuals on the terrorist watch list apprehended between the ports of entry, not at ports of entry. These are people that were found between our ports of entry. Also, in addition to these terrorists on the watch list, we had over 2 million gotaways. These are people that have evaded Border Patrol that we know of because of different cameras.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking. We had 56,154 arrests of aliens with criminal convictions or outstanding warrants. And when you look at the drugs, fentanyl comes to mind. There was 9,254 pounds of fentanyl seized at the ports of entry.
Wow.
Those numbers should shock people.
And you mentioned criminal records for some of these, but I'm assuming that with that many coming from that many countries, there's some places that they may not have those kind of records. They don't have very good records, so we may not even know what kind of people a lot of them are that are coming over here.
Well, you know how the administration says, they vet everyone coming across. You can't vet everyone coming across because some of the countries don't even have the information, and some of the countries we don't even have good relationships with. So they're not going to provide us that information. If we're vetting them, they're vetting against our own database, not against what they've done in their home countries.
Right. Yeah. That Yeah, I think most people recognized a while ago that that whole claim to have vetted him was a farce. Uh, uh, but it's just scary. It's hard to believe that we've allowed an invasion, that our federal government has led this invasion of our country over the last 4 years.
It is shocking, and you know as well as I do, they're not going to stay at the border. They're going to be in our backyard, and that's what states are facing.
Absolutely. So, what does a state and local engagement director actually do?
So, not only do we do the legislative policy, we also get our activists involved as well as our members to speak up, to participate in the system, to use your voice to to effectuate change, but also to engage and educate others so that they can take action as well.
Right. Well, and in Tennessee, just like I'm sure every other state in the union, some of the biggest opposition, well, next to the Democrats, obviously all the Democrats are a problem, or 99% of them, but the Chamber of Commerce, I'm sure in every decent-sized town, we get pushback from them on these type of things, and as far as doing anything that's really significant, like E-Verify, which we'll talk about here in a little bit.
It's funny, you hear some of these pro-business groups say, oh, I oppose illegal immigration, but in the very next breath, they want the workers. So they want all of these people who have come here illegally to have pathways to citizenship so that they can then employ them, undercutting Americans' wages and making things difficult.
They seem to have this mindset that they have a constitutional right to cheap labor. That seems to be the mindset. And I just wonder to myself, okay, if you're justifying this in your mind, what are those other things that what other laws are you okay with breaking in the name of business?
Absolutely. And I think the big thing to recognize is individuals who come here don't necessarily just break one law, they have to break others to even be employed. There are laws against hiring people who are without work authorization, and yet they have Social Security fraud and other things that they've violated as well.
Yeah. It's just like any lie, because this is kind of a form of lying. So once you tell one lie, you got to tell another one to cover that one, and another one to cover that one. And in this case, you got people lying for you and lying with you.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the bottom line is we need to do better. We need to make sure that anyone we hire is actually authorized to work in this country. We need to make policy that puts American citizens first. Absolutely. And it shouldn't be that difficult.
Yeah, I think it's for a long time, even before the Biden invasion, it was a lack of will, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. Definitely a lack of will.
It's interesting to see immigration. It's not one of those issues where it's a right-left issue, because a lot of times you have the unions advocating for the same thing that you would think that big business wouldn't be, but yet they are. So you have this weird alliance in the immigration issue that you don't see elsewhere.
So in Tennessee, who do you work with in Tennessee?
We have some great state leaders in Tennessee. I know that you are friends with Joanne Bregman. We've worked with her for many years, and Bobby Petray with Eagle Forum, and many others that we've worked with over the years. We have some sheriffs. The executive director of the Tennessee Sheriff's Association is a former sheriff who we've worked with, and looking to build out there and to really engage folks and fight for Tennessee.
So is that Jeff Long? Is that who you're talking about?
Jeff Bledsoe.
Bledsoe, okay. And I don't know him personally, so he's been good, then I take it, on the issue of illegal immigration?
He has been. As sheriff, he worked with FAIR, and yes, I commend him for his efforts, and he's leading the Sheriff's Association.
Oh, okay. What county is he in? Do you know?
Ooh, I knew you were going to ask, and I cannot think of the county of Tennessee.
Well,
sorry.
Well, I'll find out. I mean, I haven't heard of a lot of law enforcement that's really been good on this issue in Tennessee. So I definitely want to look him up, maybe have him on the show and talk a little bit, because we definitely need the people in law enforcement with the right mindset on this issue to to step up. And so I'm glad to hear we have at least one. I'm sure there's others, but they're not necessarily making the news. So I was glad to hear we have at least one.
Well, you have a couple of sheriffs who are actually working with the 287G program, which allows them to work with federal immigration officials. It deputizes them for certain immigration functions, and that's an area that I'd love to delve into further with you. The 287G program is probably going to be a way that the Trump administration works with local officials to really start working for their removal process.
Okay, and so I'm sure, so that's going to fall under, is Mr. Holman going to be the one leading that push as far as the 287G from the federal side and reaching out to all the local law enforcement?
Yes, he will, as the incoming borders are. We already have, Ferris has worked with sheriffs, and he has agreed to talk to our sheriffs and, kind of share plans on what he envisions moving forward. So we're excited about that, and we have a lot of law enforcement who are anxious to help and secure their communities, because illegal immigration actually impacts their communities. They don't know who's coming into their communities, and so it's a danger. It's a public safety issue for them.
Absolutely. So have you had a lot of conversations then since the election with different sheriffs from different places, to include Tennessee?
We have had conversations with sheriffs. I know that we have not necessarily had those conversations in Tennessee. I do know there are 2 counties that have 287G, as I mentioned. That was Greene County and Knox County. We will be reaching out to former Sheriff Bledsoe, who is the executive director of the Tennessee Sheriffs, to see if we can get information out to him and to other sheriffs in the state.
Because I know that I do think day one that we'll see President Trump make a push on this, and I know that our governor has said that he's going to work with him. Seeing is believing, because we really have not. Our state, in my opinion, especially during the time Biden has been in office, has really lagged. I mean, if anything, they've done what they can to attract illegal aliens, but hopefully that'll change now. So one of the problems we have in Tennessee, and I know it's everywhere, maybe the names may be different, but some of the motives are the same, some of the ideology. But in Tennessee, the groups here that actually promote illegal immigration, I'm thinking Turk, Catholic Charities, Chamber of Commerce. Have I missed anybody?
Well, I definitely have opposed some of the efforts by Turk. Catholic Charities is one all across the country. I know Lutheran Social Services has been one that kind of has been doing that as well. And there are others that I know that are working to facilitate, for lack of a better word, illegal immigration and making it more favorable in a lot of states, and it's frustrating to see. They'll say that they're doing this from a humanitarian perspective, but the reality is they're acting as a magnet for more illegal immigration into these states.
Absolutely. Now, so you've had some dealings with Turk, and which, for those of you who don't know, that's Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, or Refugee... Tennessee Immigration Refugee Rights Coalition. I think I got a extra C up there. And if you want, I can tell you that there is some information about that organization on a website known as Daily Roll Call. That's Kathy Henders's blog. She was on the show last week. You can go on there and you can dig up information and read about the guy who first started that organization. That's a bad apple right there, but that's kind of a whole nother story. But Turk unfortunately, at the state level, I mean, not only are they pro-illegal immigrant, they're pro-refugee and whatnot, but we have Republican legislators who, after all this time, all these years, because Turk's been around for a while, some of these legislators have been up there for a good while, they still go to them for advice about legislation. It's insane.
It is crazy. I know when we were working to strengthen Tennessee's anti-sanctuary law, Turk actually battled with us and was a thorn in the side as we tried to really tighten up Tennessee's law. And they continue to fight. They continue to work with other open borders advocates and push their agenda, especially as a welcoming city in Nashville and other places. They've really stepped up their efforts in that regard.
So what legislation have you worked on for here in Tennessee? Obviously the sanctuary bill. What else have you worked on?
E-Verify, we were looking to try and do remittances, the repeal of the professional and commercial licensure.
Yep.
All of those efforts in the recent times we've helped work with. Like I said, you had some great state leaders who have been very effective in what they're doing and really pushing. And it's good to see, and we appreciate all of their hard work that they've done.
It's just a shame that, I mean, we do have some people, some of the names you've mentioned, that really almost, some of them were almost a one-man show or one-woman show in that case, in terms of the people that was putting out the information to get it to the right legislators. But it just seems like we had, as bad as the problem was, I mean, we passed the professional license bill in 2022, a year after the floodgates had been opened. And now, fortunately, we were able to get it repealed this past session. And so that's a good thing. But I think, even though we got Trump in there, the people of Tennessee are going to have to keep an eye on our legislature, because there's not enough of them, in my opinion, that have the right attitude about it. And then some of them just take the attitude of, hey, it's a federal issue, nothing we can do. And it didn't help when our AG said that about a month ago.
I heard that he had said that, and you know what? The costs come to the state. So it is very much a state issue, and people need to engage because they need to realize it impacts the local and state level. And if they don't act, it's going to be bad.
Absolutely. And let's talk about some of those impacts. I mean, there's the schools, and I do have one chart on, or one slide on that. So, this is English language learners in Tennessee. Now, this slide data is only through 2021, which of course 2021 was the year the floodgates opened. All right, so I was not able to get current data, from 22 through 24. But look at that. That's in millions of dollars. The red is the state cost, and the gray is the local cost. And that is a result of just having to put them in our schools. And of course, that is like I'm trying to think of the term there. That's a result of the Plyler versus Doe Supreme Court decision in '82 that said that states, had to provide K through 12 education for illegal alien children. But it cost us. I mean, they're not paying it for. They're saying we have to do it, but they're not giving us anything for it.
Yeah, the federal government only contributes about just under 8% of the total education budgets that the states have. And education is probably the most expensive things that burden the states. We've looked at the costs of education, and Plyler was a bad decision based on the fact that the ruling was done when they didn't have the costs. Now that we know how much it costs to educate them, that decision could potentially be revisited. by some of the states, and we've heard some discussion about that. I think the big thing with K to 12 education is that people try and budget for this, and when you have the open borders, and when you have the things that we've seen lately, the school systems just haven't been able to keep to a budget because they have to take these individuals into the school system. So when you have people coming in all throughout the year and the expenses incurred, that's an issue. And when you have them coming from countries where they just don't speak English and they don't really even necessarily speak their own languages well, yeah. There have been issues, and it just drags the whole system. It takes away from the classroom and the learning, and it puts American citizens behind as well.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's an unfunded mandate. I mean, I think it's a violation of the 10th. They have the anti-commandeering doctrine, which the court has always recognized that they cannot force states to pay for federal programs. But this is forcing states to pay for a federal court opinion. And I don't know how it's been allowed to go as long as it has. And I don't know why states have not pushed back more. But I seem to remember now, I did talk to one representative, and I think he is going to, and I'll put him in touch with you, I think he plans on creating a challenge to this, or passing a law that would lead to a challenge to Plyler versus Doe.
And I would say Tennessee is probably not the only state. We've heard that Texas is considering that type of legislation as well. I know Oklahoma recently sent a bill to the federal government for the cost of education, and others are considering similar type moves to draw attention to just how much it costs the states to educate K through 12. Yeah. And I would say the next thing that I would argue is against in-state tuition.
Oh, yes.
Allowing post-secondary individuals to get tuition rates at the same cost as what a American citizen gets. I mean, when you're looking at Tennessee, a neighboring state, if they go to a Tennessee university, have to pay out-of-state fees. Why should you be giving someone who is an illegal alien in-state tuition? It is mind-boggling.
And our state has tried to do that more than once over the last 10 years. And
yes.
And if I guarantee you, if the election hadn't turned out the way it had, that would be one of the bills that they would be pushing this year. Guarantee it.
We've been fighting that for a while in your state, so yes, I wouldn't doubt it.
And in Tennessee, in the Senate, the Senate sponsor is normally Todd Gardenhire of Chattanooga, and the House sponsor is normally Mark White of Memphis. Those two love illegal aliens, and they want them to have in-state tuition. So just remember that. If you're in those districts, you got to watch those guys. In fact, Gardenhire has a bill this year. I'm trying to think how this goes. There was legislation passed last year that was supposed to require that illegal aliens be reported to ICE. And I want to say this one, his intent is to exempt SROs in the schools from reporting illegal aliens or something to that effect. He doesn't want the kids reported. And that's the bill he's pushing this year.
It's SB 17, and it would kind of undermine the state sanctuary law, but what you were talking about was the school resource officers, and it would prohibit them from communicating or cooperating with immigration officials. That is simply dangerous because, for example, if you have a gang member, or there were a lot of instances where individuals who had come across that were older than 17 were enrolling in public schools. You couldn't communicate or cooperate with federal officials in that regard, and it creates a public safety issue. Right now, school resource officers, ICE doesn't generally go into schools right now. It's considered kind of a safe place. But they do go in if there's exigent circumstances, i.e., if there is a public safety issue or terrorism or some other threat. Well, this bill would essentially kind of sideline them because you wouldn't be allowed to communicate or cooperate with them. And there's also a civil penalty to this bill. So while sounds really good, it's really not a good bill at all. It is troublesome.
Let's talk about some of the, and once again, it's like I said, the AG and others, and I've heard this for years, even before the AG. I've always heard the excuse, well, hey, it's a federal issue, there's nothing we can do. But states can do things to make their state less attractive to illegal aliens. Let's talk about some of the things other states have done, other policy issues that you know about, that are other policies that you know about that would be good to help a state discourage. Because, like I said, the president can't do it all. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, you know, even if there was a steady rate of deportation over the next 4 years, they're not all just going to get up and leave. So we want them at least out of our state. So what are some suggestions?
So first and foremost is E-Verify. I know that Tennessee has mandated that some private employers, but not all, E-Verify. I think the first time that they passed something was back in 2009, and it required that you E-Verify if you had more than 50 employers. In 2022, it was expanded to mandate that employers with more than 35 employees E-Verify. However, this means that companies under that threshold need not to E-Verify and will be potentially hiring illegal aliens. We did some research back in 2019 and found there were over 200,000 small businesses in Tennessee that actually employed between 1 and 34 people. That means those businesses would not be required under Tennessee law to E-Verify. Incidentally, NFIB and the Chamber of Commerce both supported the 2022 expansion, which tells you that this is not what Tennessee needed at all.
Absolutely. And I remember in 2019, Representative Griffey brought forth a bill. Initially, it was going to be if you even had one employee, but when it was all said and done, I think they got it down to like 25. That was the number. And there's video of this. It was under the, I think, Public Affairs Committee or something along those lines. And it was brought up, and somebody asked the question, well, is the chamber okay with this? They asked that in the committee meeting. And he said, well, yeah, we've talked to the chamber. And but they went out of the committee meeting, kind of put the meeting on hold and got the blessing of the chamber. Because that guy that was asking the question wanted to hear from the chamber that they were okay with this. And that's how much power they have. That's how much influence they have. So you probably want to wonder, when all those people that are endorsed so highly by the chamber and even to some degree the NFIB, you might want to take a little closer look there in some cases. I'm not saying that everybody that's got a chamber endorsement or everybody that's got an NFIB endorsement is a bad guy overall, but on that issue, it's worth a second look.
Are wanting to line their pockets. They want to get the cheapest possible labor to increase their profits. And what people need to realize is most illegal aliens are coming from impoverished nations, and they're willing to work for remuneration that they consider reasonable, even if it's not what would be considered a fair market rate or even minimum wage. And so you have that dichotomy that is really, pushing this agenda. In, 2022, I think Pew found that about 8.3 million illegal aliens participated in the workforce in the United States. And when you look at it, we had a cost study that was released in 2023. 25% of illegal aliens participating in that workforce were actually working under the table. Wow. And so that's kind of indicative of why it is so crucial to e-verify. And it's so easy. It's free. That's what people need to understand. E-verify, almost everybody that e-verifies gets approved immediately or within 24 hours. It's over 98%. I can tell you FAIR e-verifies, and when I asked our HR person who had been there 6 years, she said there was only one instance where it was not an immediate return for the person on whether they were or if they were workforce authorized. That was resolved within 24 hours. So for people to say that it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of time, that's simply not the case. And we can do this. It has 88%, people who use it approve it.
And you mentioned the lower wages, I haven't seen recent numbers, but in the past, and you may have something on this, they were showing in Tennessee at least, where over the last several years, and this was going back a few years, the percentage of new jobs that were going to illegal aliens. So they were saying we created X number of jobs over the last X number of years, but then we got to digging, and the bulk of those jobs went to illegal aliens. Do you have anything on that?
I saw something in Tennessee. I don't have the exact numbers, but then you have to look at those jobs that they're going to are not necessarily the jobs that are going to be well paying. And when you look at this, who are they replacing out of those jobs? Who are they knocking out of those jobs? And a lot of it is those people who may only have a high school diploma. Those are being threatened by an illegal alien workforce. Also, if you look at the STEM type of positions, those who have bachelor's or graduate degrees could be impacted by those individuals as well. So if you want policies that put Tennesseans first, e-verify is the way to do it. Mandate it. Make sure that all private employers must verify their workforce. Don't give an excuse.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the HB1 visa? That's been kind of an issue here recently. You had the flack between Elon Musk and others, and he seems to be all on board with the HB1 visas. But I'm sure you've got some numbers. I think that that could impact higher wage earners in Tennessee as well as other places. So can you talk about that program a little bit?
The thing is, those are supposed to be people that are not able. We're supposed to hire those people where we can't find American workers. And what you're seeing is that they're actually replacing American workers with H-1B visas because there are restrictions on the visa. They are able to keep those people. They can't necessarily change jobs without having to go back to their country. So when you look at this, it's very restrictive for them. If they lose their job, they have to leave the country. So that's one of the reasons why the employer is really able to control them a lot better and undercut Americans. And we saw that with things like Disney and others, that workers were being replaced by people on a visa who were doing their same jobs.
And a lot of times they have to train their replacement. They have to train
Yes.
this person, this HB1 visa holder that's taking their job.
Absolutely. And it's frustrating to see. And that's why we need policies in place that put Americans first.
Now, below the HB1, is it what, HB2? Is that like the unskilled, or is there another title for that?
There are H-2B visa holders. You also have H-2A for agriculture workers. There are a whole slew of different categories for visas. And depending on what they are and what's the criteria for them. They're all things that we need to consider looking forward. And when we consider policy, we need to make sure that the interests are being American first. And whether it be merits, having immigration based on merit, as opposed to chain migration. There are a whole bunch of other considerations, that need to be considered on the federal level. But the bottom line is for states, because we can't control on the state level, the number of visas, we can control verifying those employment and making sure that employers follow the law.
So what's the requirement? You said for the HB1 or I'm assuming the HB2, that they're not supposed to use those. Companies are not supposed to resort to those unless they can't fill the job. So what's the criteria for determining that they can? Is it just, oh, hey, we can't fill this? I mean, who's checking to make sure that when they say that they can't fill this job, what's the criteria and who's the gatekeeper on that?
Well, they're supposed to actually follow a certain thing, like that the market salary, that the education requirements, etc., are such that there aren't available people, that they've advertised for a position and it hasn't been able to be filled, that type of thing, before resorting to a foreign worker, but obviously not being followed. And it's hard to enforce that type of thing, and that's part of the problems that we've had, why H-1B has to be reformed. And there are several members of Congress that are looking at that. But on the other hand, there are several members, like you see on the chamber side, that are, willing to bring in more foreign workers at the expense of their constituents.
So right now, is there any agency responsible for making sure that when those companies bring somebody over that they actually had to resort to that, or are we just taking their word for it that, oh, they couldn't find anybody? Is there anybody assigned to check on them?
There is, but I don't believe that that's been necessarily one that's been enforced as well as it should have been. There are federal agencies that are supposed to do that. And we do see that, but enforcement hasn't been great.
Right. Like everything involving immigration, there's been pretty much no enforcement. In fact, the federal government is just, I just can't get over it sometimes how insane it is that they have led this invasion. But the states are all to blame too. I mean, the states, whether it's, hey, we want the cheap labor, or they really, in my opinion, overall have not done enough to push back against the federal government. Just the fact that we've had Plyler versus Doe, I know it's a Supreme Court opinion, but that's 82. That was 1982, and I can't believe states haven't pushed back more on it before now, because we've had significant numbers and we've had significant issues for a good while. So, any other suggestions on what Tennessee should do, or any other bills you might be tracking? Because I know you know some people in the state. I'm sure you're in contact with them.
Yeah, so remittance bill. For those of you who don't know, remittance fees are remittances are those monies that are sent out of the country and that we lose the money from the economy. And in 2021, the United States lost $200 billion in remittances that were sent outside of the country. And that was according to the World Bank. And this is likely underestimated. The loss in remittances in 2021 is actually more than Congress has appropriated to the Department of Homeland Security in fiscal year 2023. Just to give you an indication, there are 134 countries that have received remittances from the United States. The top 5 countries: Mexico, India, Guatemala, Philippines, and China. And Mexico has received more than 1/4 of the remittances sent from the United States, 197 billion from January 2021 through June 24. We are actually working on a remittance report right now that we're hoping to release soon that has kind of looked at the states and categorized them as red, orange, yellow, and green. Red being the worst, like California, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, Illinois, Florida, those big immigration states. Tennessee would be orange. They're getting up there. So for those folks who think that doesn't impact them, well, it does. These are monies that are being sent out that you're not getting in consumption tax, that's not being spent here in the state of Tennessee. And
it's not going to the schools.
It's not going to the schools, no. Excuse me. So these are, one of the things we recommend is actually looking at placing a fee on these remittances. The other thing to note, it's not just individuals sending money to help their family and friends. The cartels are using remittances. There was an article in Reuters last, I want to say August 23, that found $4.4 billion of the remittances was, sent to Mexico and linked to the cartels. 4.4 billion. And they are not only sending the money back, they're using individuals to send small amounts so that money isn't able to be tracked to their narcotic kingpins. So what we're seeing is individuals who have come here who don't have any kind of record, they're sending small amounts of money to other areas in Mexico, then they're having individuals pick it up for the cartels. And then there was a Mexican think tank, Signos Vitales, that actually found that the number of remittances last year increased by 50% of the total number of Mexican nationals had decreased. So you had the remittances increase, the number of Mexican nationals living in the United States decrease. Go figure, it's increased 50%. Then the other thing is that we've seen the location actually shift for remittances. One of the areas that it's shifted to, Chiapas, is an area of Mexico that doesn't have a lot of foreign nationals living in the United States, and yet they're receiving a huge number of remittances. So we know that cartels are active there. And what can be done? This is one area where Oklahoma is the only state in the country that has actually placed a fee on remittances. They've only placed a 1% fee, and it's refundable if individuals file their state income tax. Well, what they're finding is that most of those fees aren't being reported on the state income tax filings, which seems to indicate the majority of these remittances are done by illegal aliens. Now, I know Tennessee doesn't have a state income tax, so it wouldn't be able to get refunded, but the state of Oklahoma has raised about $13 million annually from the remittance fees. You were talking about the burdens of education. Yeah. That the money, the fees could go towards that and offset those costs of what illegal immigration it costs the state. It would also help because what we're seeing is trafficking a lot with remittances. This would deter the cartels. It would deter networks who traffic individuals from coming into Tennessee. It would be a boon to your state because it would dissuade those individuals.
Well, that sounds like a great idea. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was a remittance bill a couple years ago. I think Representative Griffey carried that one as well. And
yes.
It didn't get anywhere, which, that was a no-brainer. I don't know why they didn't do that. That blows my mind. But that one's, somebody needs to bring that one back for sure.
It definitely would be something that could and should move because it is a benefit to the state. And it dissuades the cartels. And when you're looking at, what's going on, this is huge.
Yeah.
And it would be something that could be relatively easy to do.
Any other things you can think that the state could do to make itself less inviting to the illegals?
I would say, the big thing is also, I mentioned 287G,
Right.
having local law enforcement able to communicate and cooperate with federal immigration officials, but also being able to deputize those officers to perform certain immigration functions, smooth out things, and makes it easier to have that cooperation with the federal officials. And so that would be something that I would definitely encourage your listeners, if they can encourage their local law enforcement, particularly their sheriffs, to become 287G law enforcement would be another thing. Obviously, tightening up anything with driver's licenses and IDs to make sure that illegal aliens are not being able to use come from other states where there are driver's licenses and use those other driver's licenses to get employment. E-Verify, your law is supposed to preclude other states from doing that if they're not as strict as Tennessee. But Tennessee has started with work authorization, allowing individuals to be eligible for driver's licenses, making sure driver's licenses expire when work authorization ends. That type of thing is important as well. One of the areas where I think we didn't really mention that you might consider is the effects of things like Tren de Aragua in Tennessee. I know Tennessee was one of 19 states where that gang has now been identified, and it was 16 just in December. I mean, this is something where you look at what's happening, and it is very, very eye-opening. Tren de Aragua is basically MS-13 on steroids, and they're dangerous. They are very, very dangerous, and
probably better organized from everything we can tell. And I think our TBI did. I think our director said that they're in, I think, every major city in Tennessee.
He did say that, and the interesting thing, I don't know if people know this or not, but Venezuelans were the second highest encountered country at the border for the last year. We did a report on that, and they were the second highest level in 2021. Since 2021, there have been more than 500 Venezuelan illegal aliens encountered. And between fiscal year 2022 and 23, the numbers of Venezuelan encounters increased 77%. So you look at those numbers, you compare it to fiscal year 2020, when there was only 4,520 Venezuelans encountered total. Right now you had over 500,000.
Wow.
Those are just the encounters. We know that Tren de Aragua is seeking asylum. They've asked for, some of the members have asked for asylum. They're, communicating with other gang members. And so we know that's happening. And in addition to that, you have the unlawful parole program that the Biden administration did with Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And those numbers, you know, of individuals that have been admitted under that program, we don't know how many Trinidad members were admitted, but we do know that there are over 100 that we've been investigating for crime, heinous crime. Let's talk about Lincoln Riley.
Oh, yeah.
Her murder was done by a member of Trinidad. He had ties to Trinidad. Also Jocelyn, in the 12-year-old in Texas, there were ties to Trinidad there as well. So this is something that Tennesseans should be very concerned about. They are gaining a foothold in this country, and we need to be aware of what's going on. And the president has said he's going to go after these gang members, but you know, we need to up state laws to make sure that we are doing everything we can in Tennessee to protect our communities.
Absolutely. One quick question on the Trump's plan. How do you see it playing out? I understand a lot of these things are going to be done by executive order initially, which is basically just reversing a lot of what Biden did. And of course, he has said he's going to go after the dangerous people first, and then, but he's going to deport all the illegals. So how do you see this? How do you see this playing out? I mean, is there anything else to say about that, or are there things that we need to consider, or additional things the state can do to help?
I mean, I think what he's going to do is obviously go after those criminal aliens, those with final orders of removal, those who have recently come in. I think he is going to prioritize and, you know, work to remove those. I don't think that you can simply round everyone up. I think by taking action, hopefully others will self-deport. But it is going to be a process, and it can't be done all at once. And the best thing that we can have is states cooperating, local enforcement, law enforcement cooperating to help, you know, our federal officials and work in tandem.
So while he's doing what he needs to do at the federal level, it's all that much more important. Like you say, it's not going to happen overnight, especially when we're talking just about not necessarily the criminal. Well, they are criminals because they're all here illegal, but the ones that are here that are illegal, they came here and they're taking jobs of citizens. The states are really going to be able to set the tempo for encouraging those people to leave more so than the federal government, at least initially, because the federal government's going to be focused on the dangerous ones. So it seems to me like the states, your state is going to be make or break on dealing with that issue. And that's only going to happen if the people insist on it, because I guarantee you, Trump could be going full steam, getting rid of all the known bad apples, but the states, you know, the Chamber of Commerce crowd, if they can drag their feet on keeping cheap labor here, they will drag their feet on keeping cheap labor here.
They are going to do everything they can to try and make sure that, you know, these individuals are staying, that they have a pathway to, you know, fill these jobs, and they're going to advocate and say that, you know, we can't have an economy that doesn't, you know, have these individuals because they need them to fill the jobs. And that's simply not the case. I think if people were actually verifying and forced to, you know, follow our laws, then Americans would fill those jobs. You have a lot of folks who are either unemployed or underemployed, who are maybe not even looking in the market anymore because their jobs were taken by individuals who weren't authorized to work in the country. And so the mistake is that Americans won't do the jobs. We have seen in the past that Americans will do the job. They just want remuneration for their work.
Absolutely. You know, you talked a minute ago about how the illegals will work for a lot lower wage. Well, they'll also live in a lot worse condition than most Americans. You hear these stories about 10 or 15 people living in a house. Most of us won't do that. We don't want to live in those conditions. So that's another thing about their culture that they're used to, that, you know, they don't need as much. They don't need as much, so they work for a whole lot less, and that helps them. That helps the employer as far as, hey, you know, I can get these guys for a whole lot cheaper than I can for just the average American. So I think that's definitely a problem. Well, hey, I want to thank you for being on the program tonight and for everything you do, and I'd definitely love to have you back, and I look forward to seeing what good legislation we can get out of Tennessee this year.
We are definitely going to work with you and everybody else in the state in pushing good legislation that, like I said, that puts Americans first, that puts Tennesseans first, and that's what we want to see. And we really appreciate your voice and reaching out to folks and helping to educate what is going on. And just know that there is an absolute role for the state to play, and it is not time to take your foot off the gas. Just because we have a president who is willing to enforce our laws, we need to be equally vigilant on the state level.
Absolutely. And is there any particular laws that you're working on right now in Tennessee? Or
as you know, the session is just starting, and
right.
So we're starting to see things come across. We would love to work on a remittance fee bill. Like I said, that would probably be our top. We are gonna fight SB 17 as it moves forward. The bill by Garden Hire is just not helpful, right, and would really undermine the sanctuary law. We're looking at SB 6 and AB 10. Those were the bills that require law enforcement to transport individuals outside of the state to sanctuary cities in certain circumstances. That is something we haven't seen the language, but I'm looking forward to reviewing that bill and seeing what it does. I know it just came across my tracker, so it is something that I'll be reviewing and looking at, and would welcome individuals reaching out to us. We're always willing to help. You mentioned our website is fairus.org, and there is a place where they can reach out for federal legislation, and we would love, to keep in touch and work with you further in the state. Absolutely.
Well, hey, once again, I appreciate it. Look forward to it. And everybody, our session starts tomorrow. The session opens up tomorrow. It'll be a little while, I think, probably towards the end of the first week of February before they file the bills. But this is a new session. We just had the elections, so it takes a little more time to get organized. But yeah, bills will be there before you know it, and definitely need to keep watching, especially on this issue. So, hey, thank you. Definitely have you back. Definitely stay in touch. I'm going to direct a few people your way so they can talk to you, and you can probably keep them from maybe making some mistakes on a few things. But I'll have some announcements and information about our guests next week in just a few minutes. But first, I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate your support. Check out our radio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Please find and follow us on Facebook as well as Twitter. Our guest next week will be Representative Bud Halsey, and we'll discuss the nullification bill, yes, it's coming back, and other important legislation for the upcoming session. That's it for now. Until next Monday, good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.